Can we ride with you?
Of course! No mother and daughter should ever have to wait alone.
The disabled CEO sat helplessly in her wheelchair outside the park, watching the empty road as her daughter waited beside her, unaware that their late driver was about to change everything. Then the little girl noticed a tired single dad walking toward his old SUV, and with the innocent trust only a child could have, she asked him the question that made her mother freeze: "Can we ride with you?" The father stopped, looked at the wheelchair, then at the little girl, and quietly answered, "Of course. No mother and daughter should ever have to wait alone." If you believe kindness can change a life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Soultales for more emotional stories about kindness, second chances, and the people who quietly make the world better. It was almost sunset when the disabled CEO, Elena Carter, sat outside the gates of a crowded city park with her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, beside her. Elena had once been known as one of the strongest women in the business world. She had built a technology company from a small office into a respected corporation, negotiated deals with people twice her age, and never allowed anyone to see weakness in her. But 3 years earlier, a terrible highway accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her mind remained sharp, her ambition remained strong, but simple things that other people never thought about had become daily battles. Getting through a doorway, finding an accessible elevator, transferring into a car, or simply waiting for someone to push her wheelchair over uneven ground could remind her of everything she had lost. Sophie was different. She had inherited her mother's determination but none of her mother's bitterness. She was healthy, energetic, and endlessly curious. That afternoon, she had spent nearly 2 hours running through the park, feeding birds, collecting tiny yellow flowers, and laughing at the ducks near the pond. Elena had watched her from beneath a tree, smiling whenever Sophie turned around to make sure her mother was still there. It was one of the few places where Elena could forget about boardrooms, medical appointments, investors, and the painful reality of needing assistance. For Sophie, the park was simply a place where she could be a child. Their driver was supposed to arrive at 5:30. At first, Elena wasn't worried. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 40. Her phone showed several unanswered calls. The driver finally sent a message explaining that traffic had brought the entire road to a standstill because of an accident several streets away. Elena sighed and locked her phone. She knew she could call another driver, but getting a wheelchair-accessible vehicle on short notice was nearly impossible. Sophie sat beside her mother on the bench, swinging her little legs and watching people leave the park one by one. As the sky began turning orange, the park became quieter. Elena tried to hide her frustration, but Sophie noticed. She gently placed her hand on her mother's arm, as if reminding her that she wasn't alone. Then an old dark blue SUV pulled up near the sidewalk. A tired-looking man stepped out. He was in his early 40s, wearing a simple work shirt with rolled-up sleeves and worn jeans. His name was Daniel. He had spent the entire day working maintenance jobs across the city, and the tiredness on his face showed how badly he needed to get home. Daniel had his own struggles. He was a single father raising his 10-year-old son, Noah. His wife had passed away years earlier, leaving him with a child, a mountain of bills, and a promise he had made beside a hospital bed that he would never let his son feel abandoned. Daniel wasn't rich. His SUV was old, the paint was fading, and one of the doors made a strange clicking sound whenever he opened it. But Daniel kept it running because it was the one thing that allowed him to work and get Noah to school. He had just opened his driver's door when Sophie suddenly stood up and looked toward him. She noticed the empty road, then her mother's wheelchair, then Daniel's spacious SUV. Without thinking about social status, money, or the possibility of being rejected, she walked a few steps toward him and asked if they could ride with him because their driver was late. Daniel looked at the little girl, then at Elena. Elena's expression changed instantly. She was used to people staring at her wheelchair, pretending not to notice, or offering help in ways that made her feel smaller. She expected Daniel to hesitate. Instead, he simply looked at the sky, noticed how quickly the light was disappearing, and told them he could take them home. Elena froze because there was something strangely familiar about the way he said it. There was no pity in his voice. No hesitation. No expectation of payment. He was simply helping. Daniel carefully checked whether his SUV could accommodate Elena's wheelchair. It wasn't specially designed for wheelchair transportation, but the rear seats folded down, giving him enough space to secure the chair. He helped Elena move safely into the passenger seat while Sophie climbed into the back. Elena quietly apologized for the inconvenience, but Daniel brushed it aside and told her that helping someone get home safely was never an inconvenience. As they pulled away from the park, Sophie began talking about everything she had done that afternoon. She told Daniel about the ducks, the flowers, and a little boy who had accidentally thrown a ball into the pond. Daniel listened with a smile. Elena remained quiet, watching him through the reflection in the window. Something about his calmness unsettled her. She couldn't understand how a stranger who looked exhausted could still have enough kindness left to help them without asking who she was. Then Sophie asked Daniel where his own children were. Daniel paused for a moment before explaining that he had a son named Noah waiting for him at home. He said Noah was the most important person in his life. Elena looked at him again. The answer was simple, but she could hear the love behind every word. Halfway through the journey, Daniel noticed Elena struggling to adjust the blanket over her legs. He pulled over safely and helped her without making her feel embarrassed. Elena thanked him, and for the first time in years, she felt as though someone was helping her without seeing her disability first. They were almost strangers, yet Daniel treated her with the same quiet dignity he would have given anyone else. Then Daniel's phone rang. It was Noah. The boy was worried because his father wasn't home yet. Daniel reassured him that he was on his way and promised he would bring dinner. Sophie immediately asked if Noah liked pizza. Daniel laughed and said that Noah loved pizza but had recently started complaining that his father always ordered the same kind. Sophie giggled, and even Elena smiled. But as Daniel continued driving, Elena suddenly recognized something. She had heard that voice before. Several months earlier, her company had received a letter from a maintenance worker who had saved an employee during an electrical emergency. The worker had refused a bonus and had only asked the company to repair an unsafe section of the building. Elena had personally approved the request. She remembered the man's name. Daniel. She stared at him in disbelief. She realized this wasn't their first connection. Months before, while reviewing company safety reports, she had read about his act of courage. She had never met him because she had been recovering from another medical procedure at the time. Daniel had no idea that the woman sitting beside him was the CEO of the company he had once helped. He didn't know she had approved his request. He didn't know that the company had recently been searching for a new facilities supervisor, a position that could have changed his financial situation completely. When they finally reached Elena's home, Daniel helped her out of the vehicle and carefully moved her wheelchair onto the driveway. Sophie hugged her mother and then turned to thank him. Elena watched Daniel prepare to leave. She wanted to offer him money, but something told her that would be the wrong thing to do. Instead, she asked him to wait. She told him she wanted to thank him properly, but Daniel simply said that if she truly wanted to thank him, she should remember how lonely it could feel to need help. Then he told her that sometimes people don't need to be rescued, they simply need someone willing to stand beside them until they can find their way forward. Those words stayed with Elena long after Daniel drove away. The next morning, Elena arrived at her company earlier than usual. She asked her assistant to bring her the maintenance report from several months earlier. When she saw Daniel's name, she remembered everything. She learned that Daniel was still working temporary jobs and struggling to support his son. She also learned that he had never asked for anything from the company after helping that employee. Elena didn't give him charity. Instead, She offered him a permanent position overseeing safety and facilities for one of her company's largest buildings, with a salary that would allow him to stop worrying about whether the next month's rent would be paid. Daniel was stunned. He initially refused because he didn't want anyone feeling sorry for him. Elena told him the position had nothing to do with pity. She had offered it because he had already proven that he had courage, responsibility, and integrity. Months passed, and Daniel's life began to change. He still drove his old SUV for a while, even after he could afford something newer, because Noah loved that car. Elena's company became safer under Daniel's leadership, and Sophie began visiting Daniel and Noah regularly. What started as one desperate request outside a park slowly became a friendship between two families who had once believed they had to face everything alone. One evening, Elena returned to the same park with Sophie. This time, her driver arrived early, but Elena asked him to wait. She wanted to sit beneath the same tree where Daniel had found them. Sophie smiled and reminded her mother about the day she had asked a stranger for a ride. Elena looked toward the road and quietly said that sometimes the people who enter our lives for only a few minutes can leave footprints that remain forever. She had spent years believing that losing the ability to walk meant losing part of herself. But Daniel had taught her something different. Her wheelchair had never made her less valuable. Her struggles had never made her weak. And accepting kindness did not mean surrendering her strength. Sometimes strength was allowing someone else to help. Sometimes courage was admitting that you were tired. And sometimes the greatest turning point in a person's life came from a simple question asked by a child. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Soultales so more people can hear stories that remind us that compassion can appear in the most unexpected moments. And before we end, I want you to leave just one comment: kindness can change a life. Because somewhere in the world, there may be a mother waiting alone, a father struggling silently, a child hoping someone will notice, or a person who simply needs one stranger to stop and say, "You don't have to face this alone." And maybe, just maybe, that stranger could be you.